The sun was just beginning its slow rise above the desert hills when Elena stepped out of her family's wickiup. The morning air was cool, gentle, and full of the soft sounds of awakening birds. She loved this hour of the day more than any other. The light moved like a warm ribbon across the land, touching the rocks, the cacti, and the tall grasses with a soft, golden glow. For Elena, this time always felt peaceful, like the world was giving her a quiet invitation to begin again. She carried a small woven basket on her arm, empty for now, but soon it would hold the plants she needed: white sage, prickly pear pads, and a few other herbs her grandmother had asked her to collect. Her grandmother's voice still echoed in her memory from that morning. "Take your time, Elena. Listen to the land, and the land will guide you." Elena smiled at the thought. Her grandmother always spoke that way, with kindness that felt like a warm blanket around the heart. Elena began walking toward the canyon trail. The path was familiar to her. She had traveled it since she was a child. But she also knew that some parts of the land were avoided by her people. Not because of danger from animals or sudden cliffs, but because the land beyond a certain point belonged to others ranchers who had settled in the area not many years before. Though there was no open conflict, there was always caution. Everyone knew that misunderstandings could happen when strangers crossed paths. Still, Elena stayed within the safe area, or so she believed. She followed the sound of trickling water to a small spring where she gathered the first few plants of the morning. Kneeling in the soft dirt, she worked gently, collecting only what she needed, and whispering a quiet thank you to the earth with each plant she placed in her basket. Her grandmother had taught her that every plant had a purpose and a spirit, and to take without thanks was to forget the balance that kept the world whole. After a while, Elena stood and brushed the dirt from her hands. The sun was higher now, and the warmth touched her skin in a pleasant way. She continued farther along the canyon wall, moving with easy footsteps, enjoying the beauty of the land around her. She saw jackrabbits darting between bushes and a hawk circling high in the sky. Everything felt calm, steady, and right. But as she walked, following a cluster of flowering shrubs she did not recognize, Elena slowly drifted beyond the place she usually stopped. She did not notice. She was focused on the bright blossoms and the unusual pattern of their leaves. She wanted to take a few samples home to study with her grandmother. Curiosity made her steps a little quicker and her attention a little narrower. The land here looked no different from the land she had just crossed. Same rocks, same shrubs, same wide sky, so she didn't feel any need to turn back. Besides, she planned to return soon, long before the sun reached its highest point. As she approached a tall juniper tree, she bent down to examine a plant with silver-green leaves shaped like tiny feathers. She smiled, pleased with her discovery. She reached out to touch it, and at that exact moment, the world changed beneath her feet. There was a sudden, sharp pull upward. Something strong tugged around her waist and shoulders, and before she could understand what was happening, she found herself rising off the ground. Her breath caught in her throat, not in fear exactly, but in complete surprise. One moment, she had been touching the earth, and the next, she was hanging several feet above it, wrapped in a thick rope net. The basket slipped from her arm and fell to the ground, spilling the herbs she had so carefully collected. Elena reached for it instinctively, but of course, she could not touch it now. She swung gently in the air, the net holding her firmly but not painfully. She tried to move her arms, then her legs, but the net pressed in just enough to keep her from slipping free. She inhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. This must be one of the traps her people had warned her about, snares set by ranchers to catch cattle thieves or wild animals. She had never seen one before, but now she understood how they worked. It was frightening mostly because she had no idea how long she would be stuck or who would find her first. Elena looked around. The canyon was quiet, except for the whisper of wind moving through the bushes. The world looked strange from this new height, familiar, yet distant. She could see farther than before the trail she had walked, the spring where she had gathered plants, even the distant hills touched with morning light. Everything felt peaceful except for the fact that she was swinging from a tree like a piece of laundry left out to dry. She tried again to twist her body enough to reach the knot or rope above. But the net was too tight for any meaningful movement. She sighed and let herself hang still, saving her energy. There was no point struggling. She knew that much. Minutes passed, then more minutes. She guessed it must have been at least an hour. The sun was warmer now. A soft breeze brushed her face, offering a little comfort. She imagined her grandmother shaking her head gently, saying, "Curiosity is a gift, but remember to walk with awareness." Elena whispered an apology to the air, hoping the land would forgive her. Still, she was not hopeless. Someone would come eventually. Whether it was one of her own people or the person who set the trap, someone would notice. She just hoped the person who found her would be kind and calm. The last thing she wanted was a misunderstanding. As she hung there waiting, Elena let her thoughts drift to memories. Her childhood running through open fields, her mother's soft singing at night, the laughter of her younger cousins as they played by the river. These memories soothed her, helped her stay grounded even while physically suspended above the ground. But the waiting was long, and the quiet around her grew heavier. With each passing moment, she became more aware of every small sound, the rustle of lizards beneath bushes, the soft creak of the rope above her, the distant call of a bird. The world felt much larger now, and she felt very small within it. Then, just when she began to wonder if the day would pass without anyone coming, she heard a faint crunch of footsteps on dry soil. Her breath caught again. Not in fear, but in alertness. She looked toward the sound but could see only shapes of shrubs and rocks. The footsteps grew louder, steady and unhurried. Whoever it was seemed confident, familiar with the land. Elena's heart began to beat a little faster. She straightened as much as the net allowed, preparing herself. A moment later, a figure appeared from behind a cluster of mesquite bushes. He walked into the open space with the easy posture of someone who had spent most of his life outdoors. A cowboy hat shaded his eyes, and his boots left clear marks in the dust. He carried no weapon in his hands. In fact, he seemed to carry only a small coil of rope on his belt, and a calm curiosity on his face. He stopped when he saw her. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he did not rush forward or step back. Instead, he stood still, quietly observing, clearly surprised but not alarmed. Elena kept her eyes on him, her body tense though she tried not to show it. She did not know him, but he did not look threatening. He simply looked astonished. For a long moment, the two of them just stared at each other, an Apache woman hanging from a cowboy's trap, and a cowboy trying to understand how his day had suddenly taken such an unexpected turn. The man finally spoke, his voice steady and gentle. "Well now," he said, not unkindly. "Looks like you found something of mine." Elena did not answer yet. She only watched him closely, trying to see more than his words, his expression, his posture, the way he held himself. Everything about him suggested calmness, maybe even concern. The cowboy took a small step forward, careful and slow, as if approaching a skittish horse. He raised his hands slightly, palms open, showing he meant no harm. "It's all right," he continued softly. "I'm not here to trouble you. Let me help you down." And so began a moment neither of them would forget, a moment born not of conflict, but of unexpected chance, quiet caution, and a slow-growing trust. Caleb Turner stood there for a moment, unsure if he should move closer or let the woman speak first. The sunlight touched the brim of his hat, making a soft glow around him. He wasn't a man who scared easily, but seeing someone caught in his snare, especially someone who clearly didn't mean harm, left him both surprised and concerned. Elena watched him carefully. She didn't speak yet, but her eyes followed every small movement he made. She could feel the net shift slightly whenever she breathed, which reminded her of the strange and uncomfortable position she was in. Hanging above the ground made her feel exposed, and she couldn't run or hide even if she wanted to. So she stayed alert, trying to understand the man in front of her. Caleb finally decided to take another slow step forward. "I'm Caleb," he said in a gentle tone, as if the simple sharing of his name might help her relax. "I didn't mean for anyone like you to get caught up there." 1. Elena wasn't sure how to respond. She didn't know this man, but she could sense he was calm. His voice didn't carry anger or impatience. He spoke like someone who wanted to fix a mistake, not make it worse. When she didn't answer, Caleb nodded slightly, as if telling himself not to expect too much too soon. "All right," he said quietly. "I'm going to help you down. But I'll move slow, so I don't scare you." He stepped closer, and Elena tensed. The cowboy noticed immediately, and stopped. "I won't touch you unless I need to cut the rope," he explained gently. "You'll be back on the ground soon." Elena finally found her voice. "Be careful," she said simply. Her words were calm, not sharp, but they reminded him that she wasn't helpless or unaware. "I will," Caleb promised. He moved toward the tree where the rope was secured. Elena watched him closely. She could see now that his clothes were worn from years of ranch work and that his boots had dust from long walks across the land. He didn't move like someone in a hurry. He walked with quiet steps, as if he didn't want to disturb her or the land around them. Caleb examined the rope. "The knot is tight," he said, mostly to himself, "but I can loosen it if I untangle this part." He reached up and tugged at the rope gently, testing it. Elena felt the net sway a little. She breathed slowly, trying to stay calm. She reminded herself that panicking wouldn't help. This man seemed patient, and she needed patience too. Caleb worked carefully. He didn't yank or pull suddenly. He took his time, making sure each movement was steady. Every now and then, he glanced at Elena to make sure she was all right. "You're doing well," he said kindly. It took several minutes, but finally, the knot loosened enough for the net to begin lowering. Caleb held the rope with both hands, letting the net descend slowly instead of dropping quickly. Elena felt herself moving closer to the earth, inch by inch. Relief warmed her chest, though she kept her expression steady. When her feet were just a few inches above the ground, Caleb guided the last part of the descent with extra care, so she wouldn't twist her ankle or land unevenly. The moment her feet touched the dirt, she felt grateful for the solid ground beneath her. The net still clung around her like a loose blanket, but at least she wasn't suspended anymore. Caleb stepped back to give her space. "I'll cut the net," he said softly, "if that's all right with you." "Well, 200. 200. On. 200. 200. Elena nodded. She needed to be free of the ropes, but she appreciated that he asked first. Caleb carefully pulled out a small knife from his belt, not a weapon, just a ranch tool used for cutting rope. He showed it to her openly, so she knew exactly what he planned to do. Then he knelt beside her, keeping enough distance to avoid crowding her. With slow and steady cuts, he opened the net. The ropes loosened and fell away until Elena could step out completely. She brushed the dirt from her clothing and took a steady breath. Her ankle felt tender when she put weight on it, and she winced slightly. "You hurt?" Caleb asked softly. "Only a little," she replied. "My ankle." Caleb stood but didn't move closer. "You want to sit for a minute?" Elena didn't want to appear weak, but she also didn't want to ignore the pain. She gave a small nod and lowered herself to a nearby rock, where the shade from the tree protected her from the sun. Caleb stayed a few steps away, giving her space. He picked up her woven basket carefully and shook off the dust. The herbs inside had spilled earlier, and he gently gathered the ones still clean enough to keep. He placed them in the basket and set it on the ground a short distance from her. She noticed his small acts of consideration. He didn't act as if he were doing her a favor. He moved with quiet respect, like someone who understood the importance of kindness. After a moment of silence, Elena spoke. "I didn't mean to enter the place of your trap." "I know," Caleb replied softly. "You weren't doing anything wrong. That trap wasn't meant for people. Just for thieves. Or sometimes mountain animals that wander too close to the herd." Elena looked down at her ankle. "It is my fault. I walked too far while gathering plants." "It happens," he said gently. "Land doesn't always have clear lines. Sometimes the plants we want grow where we don't expect them." Elena looked up at him, surprised by his understanding. Most ranchers she had heard about did not speak that way. She studied him for a moment, trying to understand his nature. Caleb sensed her quiet examination but didn't comment on it. Instead, he asked, "Can you walk?" She tried standing. The moment she put weight on her ankle, she felt a mild sting. It wasn't unbearable, but it wasn't comfortable either. She steadied herself by resting a hand against the rock. Caleb didn't rush to help her. He waited, letting her decide what she needed. "I can walk, but slowly," she admitted. "Then I'll walk with you," he said simply. "Only if you want." Elena considered his offer. She wasn't eager to rely on someone she didn't know, especially someone from a different community. But the canyon path ahead wasn't easy, not with an injured ankle. And this cowboy had only shown respect so far. "You may walk with me," she finally said. Caleb nodded. "I'll stay beside you, but not too close." They began walking slowly. Caleb matched her pace without complaint. The path wound between rocks and desert shrubs. And though Elena moved carefully, she found comfort in having someone steady nearby. After several minutes, Caleb spoke softly, not wanting to disturb the peaceful air. "I live alone on a ranch nearby," he said. "My land is wide, but it feels smaller when you're the only one taking care of it." Elena listened quietly. She didn't interrupt. Caleb continued. "I set that trap because someone's been taking my cattle lately. I didn't want trouble with your people. I only wanted to protect my home." Elena nodded, understanding the meaning behind his words. "My people teach us to live with the land, not against it. Sometimes our paths cross with yours, without meaning to." Caleb smiled slightly. "Seems that's what happened today." Elena allowed herself a small smile, too. The tension between them had eased. Even though they came from different worlds, something about this unexpected meeting felt strangely natural. They walked a little farther. The warm breeze brushed against their faces, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. A few birds hopped between branches, watching them with bright eyes. Elena spoke softly. "Thank you for helping me." "I'm glad I was here," Caleb replied. "I'd never leave someone stuck like that." His words were simple, but sincere. Elena could feel that. The path eventually widened. She recognized a distant landmark, a tall rock shaped like a giant bowl. She felt a sense of relief. She knew the way home from there. "You don't need to go farther," she told him gently. "I can walk the rest." Caleb glanced at her ankle but respected her decision. Elena nodded. "Yes. Thank you again." "Caleb." He gave her a small, warm smile. "Take care, Elena, and watch those plants. They like to lead you on long walks." She couldn't help but let out a soft, quiet laugh. Then she turned toward her village path, her basket in hand. Her steps, slow but steady. Caleb watched her go for a moment, making sure she walked safely. Then, he turned back toward the canyon, already planning to remove the trap so no one else would get caught in it. Their worlds were different, but in that brief crossing of paths, they had found understanding, a rare and gentle connection, born from an unexpected moment in the desert. Elena walked slowly across the open stretch of land, each step gentle on her sore ankle. The sun had risen higher now, filling the desert with warm light that danced across the rocks and shrubs. She could hear the soft rustling of the wind behind her, carrying traces of dust and dried grass. It was a familiar sound. But after everything that happened, it felt different somehow, more meaningful, as if the land itself was reminding her to stay alert yet open to unexpected moments. Caleb walked beside her for a while, even though she had told him she could continue alone. He kept a respectful distance, far enough not to crowd her, but close enough in case she stumbled. His boots moved quietly over the dirt, creating a soft rhythm that matched the calm of the morning. He wasn't a talkative man by nature, and Elena wasn't eager to fill the silence either. Yet the quiet between them felt comfortable, not awkward. It was the kind of quiet that allowed thoughts to settle gently. After a few steps, Elena noticed the basket in her hand. Some of the herbs inside were bent from the fall, but most were still good. She touched the leaves lightly, grateful for the few that had survived the tumble. Her grandmother would still be able to use them. That thought brought her a touch of relief. Caleb eventually cleared his throat, not loudly, but in a way that showed he had been thinking about something for a long time before speaking. "You know," he said softly, "I didn't expect today to go like this." Elena glanced at him. "Neither did I. I've had those traps out for weeks," he continued. "Every morning I check them, and most days they're empty. Today was the last thing I imagined." Elena nodded. "I didn't see the ground change. I wasn't being careful." "You were gathering plants," Caleb replied. "You weren't doing anything wrong. Sometimes the land surprises us." His words were calm and thoughtful, and Elena found herself studying him again. She had heard stories about ranchers, some kind, some not, but Caleb didn't seem to fit any of the descriptions easily. He didn't walk like someone who believed he owned every inch of the land he stepped on. He walked like someone who listened to the earth, even if he didn't fully understand it. They continued forward until the ground grew uneven again. Elena slowed, and Caleb matched her pace without needing to be asked. Her ankle ached, but the pain was steady, not sharp, and she knew she could manage it. Caleb watched her steps carefully. "Let me know if it gets too much," he said. "I will," she replied, though she knew she would try to handle it on her own unless it truly worsened. The path narrowed between clusters of sagebrush, their silver-green leaves brushing against Elena's skirt with soft whispers. A desert lizard darted across the trail ahead of them, stopping on a warm rock to watch with bright, curious eyes. Elena looked at it and smiled, appreciating its tiny presence. In moments like that, the land felt like a living companion, full of small wonders waiting to be noticed. After a while, Elena asked, "Do you walk this way often?" Caleb thought for a moment. "Not this exact path," he replied, "but I ride through nearby spots when I check on the herd." He paused, then added, "Your people know the land better than I do. My eyes see the rocks and plants, but yours see the stories." Elena looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "I've watched your people gather plants or track the animals," Caleb explained. "There's a purpose in every step. I can't read the land the way you do. I only try to understand enough to live here peacefully." Elena considered his words. It wasn't often she heard a rancher speak with that kind of respect. She appreciated it more than she wanted to admit. "The land guides everyone," she said softly. "Sometimes through whispers, sometimes through lessons." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. Today was definitely a lesson. A gentle silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that carried meaning, like the quiet pause before a story continues. They walked until the canyon opened into a broader plain. Elena recognized it as the place where paths from her village and the nearby river crossed. The rocks here were smoother, worn down by years of wind and passing footsteps. She felt a sense of familiarity wash over her, like the embrace of a place she trusted. But her ankle reminded her she wasn't fully steady. When she stepped on a loose stone, she wobbled slightly. Caleb reached out instinctively, stopping himself before his hand touched her arm. "You all right?" he asked softly. "Yes," Elena said, regaining her balance. Just a slip. You should rest a moment, he suggested. She considered refusing, but her ankle pulsed gently in agreement. Maybe just a moment, she admitted. They sat beneath a tall rock that cast a long shadow across the ground. Elena adjusted her skirt and placed the basket beside her. Caleb rested a short distance away, respecting her space but keeping close enough for conversation. The sun warmed the earth, and a light breeze passed between them. It's manageable, she said. I have walked with worse. Caleb raised an eyebrow slightly. You seem strong. Elena looked at him calmly. Strength comes from many places. My people teach us to move with the land, even when it challenges us. That makes sense, Caleb said thoughtfully. Out on the ranch, I learned a similar lesson. You can't force the land to do what you want. You have to understand it. Work with it. Elena found herself surprised again by his words. His way of thinking wasn't common among ranchers, at least not in the stories she knew. It made her curious about him, in a quiet, cautious way. After a few minutes, Caleb sighed softly, as if sorting through thoughts he hadn't planned to share. You know, sometimes it feels strange living out here alone. The days are long. The work is steady, but the quiet gets heavy. Elena listened without judgment. She could hear honesty in his tone, the kind that didn't ask for sympathy but simply wished to be heard. Why do you stay alone? She asked gently. Caleb leaned back slightly, looking up at the sky. But little by little, people moved to towns or farther away. I stayed because the ranch feels like home. Even if it's quiet, it's my place. Elena nodded. I suppose it does. Another soft breeze brushed past them. Elena felt the calm settling between them again. Despite their different worlds, there was a surprising sense of understanding, growing gently, like a small plant finding its place in the soil. After a few more minutes of rest, Elena stood slowly. Her ankle felt slightly better. Caleb rose too, watching her posture to make sure she wasn't forcing herself. I can walk again, she said quietly. Then I'll walk with you a little farther, Caleb replied. They continued down the widening trail. The land ahead grew familiar enough that Elena felt the pull of home grow stronger with each step. She could almost imagine her family preparing the midday meal or fetching water from the river. She hoped her grandmother wouldn't worry too much when she returned. Caleb walked beside her, matching her slow rhythm once more. Neither of them rushed the journey. There was something peaceful in moving through the desert at a gentle pace, where every detail could be appreciated. The sound of their footsteps blended with the soft hum of the wind. A distant bird called out, its song rising above the quiet. Elena lifted her gaze and followed its path across the sky. It flew with effortless grace, its wings steady and confident. Your people must see many birds from here, Caleb commented. We see everything the land offers, Elena said. Birds remind us to watch from different heights, to see more than what is at our feet. Caleb smiled thoughtfully. I suppose that's true. Maybe I need to learn to look higher sometimes. Elena gave him a small smile in return. Everyone learns at their own pace. They kept walking until Elena recognized a cluster of tall cottonwood trees in the distance. Their leaves shimmered in the sunlight like pieces of polished green glass. She felt her heart lift softly. Those trees grew near the outer edges of her community's land. I am close now, she said quietly. Caleb slowed his steps. I see. Elena turned to him. Thank you for helping me today. Without your patience, I might still be hanging in that net. Caleb gave a small laugh, gentle and warm. I'm glad you're not. And I'm glad I could help. They stood in a comfortable silence for a moment. The path ahead would lead Elena home, while Caleb's route would take him back toward the ranch. Take care of your ankle, Caleb said. And you take care of your land, Elena replied. Remove the trap so no one else gets caught. I intend to, he said with a nod. First thing when I head back. Elena gave him a final, sincere look. May your days be peaceful, Caleb. And yours too, Elena. With that, she turned toward the cottonwood trees, her steps slow but steady. Caleb watched her walk until the path curved, and she disappeared behind the natural bend of the land. Then he turned and headed back the way he came, his thoughts quiet but full, carrying the memory of a morning unlike any he had experienced before. Elena moved slowly toward the cottonwood trees, their tall trunks rising like quiet guardians at the edge of her people's land. The leaves shimmered in the soft daylight, making a gentle sound like distant rain each time the wind brushed through them. Her ankles still hurt, but her steps were steadier now. Every few feet, she felt a new swell of comfort, knowing she was getting closer to home. As she approached the familiar area, she could hear faint sounds carried by the wind voices, someone laughing, and the steady rhythm of work being done near the river. These sounds, ordinary as they were, warmed her chest with relief. She had always known the desert held surprises, but she hadn't expected the day to unfold as it did. She kept walking, the sunlight warming her shoulders, until she saw two men from her village walking toward the water with baskets. They were too far to notice her yet. Elena decided to rest near a large boulder before continuing. The boulder's surface was warm, and she rested her hand on it for support. Back in the canyon, Caleb began the long walk to his ranch. The land seemed quieter now, as if reflecting his thoughtful mood. Each step reminded him of the unusual morning, the shock of finding someone in his trap, the careful work of freeing her, and the quiet, steady walk they had taken together. He had expected an ordinary day, one filled with repairing a fence or checking the cattle. But instead, the day had given him something unexpected. A moment of connection in a world where people often kept their distance. He reached the tree where the snare had hung and looked up at the branch. The rope still dangled from it like a forgotten reminder. He pulled out his knife and cut the last pieces free. The net lay on the ground, loose and harmless now. Caleb gathered it and folded it, deciding firmly that he would never use a trap like that again. Not after what had happened. It wasn't worth the chance of catching someone innocent. Back near the cottonwoods, Elena pushed herself off the boulder and continued walking. She reached the path that led directly to her village. But as she stepped forward, she heard someone call her name. She turned and saw her younger cousin, Taji, running toward her with wide eyes and slightly messy hair. "Elena," he said breathlessly. "Your grandmother was looking for you. She thought you were staying too long." Elena smiled softly at his excitement. "I am here now," she said. "I'm all right." Taji slowed his steps when he noticed her limp. "You hurt your foot?" "A little," Elena admitted. "Nothing serious." Taji looked worried. "Grandmother will still fuss." Elena laughed gently. "Yes, she will." Her cousin walked with her the rest of the way. As they entered the village, several people glanced their way, surprised to see her returning with an uneven step. No one crowded her, though. They respected her space as she moved through the familiar paths. Her grandmother emerged from their wickiup, her eyes full of concern that softened the moment she saw Elena's face. She reached for her gently. "Child," she said in a warm, steady voice. "You were gone longer than usual." Elena hugged her grandmother lightly, careful of her ankle. "I am safe. I found the plants you wanted." Her grandmother took the basket and looked inside. Then her eyes moved to Elena's ankle. "What happened?" Elena sat down on a woven blanket outside the dwelling. Several of her relatives gathered nearby, listening quietly. She told them the story, not in a dramatic way, but simply and clearly. She told them how she wandered too far while gathering herbs, how she stepped into a cowboy's snare trap, and how she was stuck there until the cowboy returned. She explained how he freed her calmly, walked with her without pushing too close, and left her safely near her home. She spoke with honesty, not leaving out her caution or her nervousness, but also not ignoring his patience or respect. When she finished, Her grandmother placed a hand on her shoulder. "The land teaches us through every step," she said softly. "You were protected today." One of the older men nodded thoughtfully. "This cowboy," he paused, choosing his words. "He acted with good intention?" "Yes," Elena replied. "He did not raise his voice or act in anger. He only helped." Elena replied. "He only helped." Another woman nearby added, "It is good to know there are still people who remember kindness." Her grandmother examined her ankle carefully. It was swollen, but not severely. She mixed a small amount of salve from plants they kept in their dwelling and rubbed it gently on the tender area. Elena felt instant cooling relief. "You will rest today," her grandmother said. "Tomorrow you will walk more easily." Elena nodded. She knew better than to argue. Meanwhile, Caleb reached his ranch, placed the folded net on the ground, and looked around at his land. The open space, the quiet wind, the steady hills, it all felt strangely different today. Not worse, just different, as if the morning had added a new layer to the place he knew so well. He spent the next few hours checking on his cattle, but his mind drifted often. He remembered Elena's calm eyes, the way she spoke with quiet strength, and the gentle confidence in her steps, even when she limped. He admired her composure, her connection to the land, and the way she observed everything with thoughtful care. Later, after tending to the animals, he sat on his porch with a cup of cool water. The sun was lowering in the sky, painting the land with warm colors. He watched the light shift across the field, thinking again of the morning. He wondered if he would ever cross paths with Elena again. The desert was wide, and they lived in separate worlds. But life had a way of surprising people. Back in the village, Elena rested while her grandmother prepared food. Her cousins sat nearby, eager to hear every detail of her story. She shared only what she felt was needed, keeping the tale gentle and simple. There was no place for fear or anger in her retelling, only caution, gratitude, and the surprising understanding she had felt when walking with Caleb. As the sun dipped lower, a soft orange glow covered the village. Elena watched the sky shift through shades of pink and gold. Her ankle still ached lightly, but she felt peaceful. The land around her was familiar, warm, and full of life. She felt grateful to be here. Grateful for the lessons of the day, and grateful even for the unexpected stranger who had chosen kindness instead of suspicion. A few hours later, while the evening settled in, 2 hunters returned to the village. They carried news from the area near the canyon. One of them said, "We saw a cowboy walking back toward his ranch early today. He did not look troubled. He even removed one of his nets." Elena felt a quiet warmth in her chest. It was a simple confirmation of what she already knew: Caleb was a man of his word. Her grandmother nodded thoughtfully. "Respectful deeds carry far," she said. "Even the wind remembers." The night arrived softly. Stars filled the sky like silver dust scattered across a deep blue blanket. Elena lay on her blanket inside the wickiup, her ankle comfortably wrapped. She thought of the day's events, surprised at how calm she felt now that she was safely home. She remembered Caleb's gentle way of speaking, how he always kept his distance to make her comfortable, and how he had walked with her without expecting anything in return. She didn't know much about his life beyond what he had shared, but she sensed he carried a quiet kindness within him, a steady warmth like the sun rising across the desert. Before drifting into sleep, she whispered a small thank you to the land, to the morning breeze, and even to the unexpected stranger who had shown patience in a moment where misunderstanding could have easily replaced peace. On the other side of the desert, Caleb sat beneath a sky full of stars. He leaned back, listening to the soft night sounds, the low calling of cattle, the breeze rustling through dry grass. He too thought of the day, of the woman who walked with quiet strength and calm dignity. He whispered, almost to himself, "I hope she made it home all right." Neither of them knew if their paths would cross again, but both carried a gentle memory of the day, a day that could have been filled with fear or confusion, but instead unfolded with respect, patience, and quiet understanding. And in a world that often divided people, this small moment of kindness stayed with them like a soft echo carried by the wind, one that neither would forget.